Welcome to Sunday morning service. Glad to have you all in the house of the Lord this morning to come and worship Him, to come and sense His presence, and to also look into His Word and see what He has for us today. I'm going to be reading this morning from Matthew chapter 10. In verse 16, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in the synagogues. And you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought of how ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what you shall speak. For it is not you that speak, but the Spirit of your Father, which speaks in you. And the brother shall deliver up the brother unto death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and cause them to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that endures to the end shall be saved. But when they persecute you into this city, flee into another. For verily I say unto you, you shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man is come. The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his own household? Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall be not known. But I tell you in darkness, that speak you in light. And what you hear in the ear, that preach you upon the housetops. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both body and soul in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? And one of them shall not fall to the ground without your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of much more value than many sparrows." Father, we come before you this morning, and we ask you, Lord, to open up to us from your word and show us from your word and through your Spirit, as you help me to speak this day, to show us what you have for us, to help us serve you each and every day. Amen. Now, Jesus is speaking to his disciples in the verses leading up to what he just said here. And he was telling them that they needed to basically preach the word. I'm paraphrasing it now. And he said, whatever they've done to me, the servant's not above his master. Whatever they've done to me, they're going to do the same thing to you. It's not always going to be an easy road for you. When you get up and you speak the truth, you'll stand before governors and magistrates, and they're going to beat you, and they're going to put you in prison. They're going to do all these things to you. And so he's telling them how it's going to be. But at the end of all that he says, he said, now aren't 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? Well, this is the King James English. And so I looked up the value of a farthing and found out that a farthing is 1/4 of an English penny. 1/4 of an English penny, and that's how much they sold sparrows for a farthing. Now, I don't know about you, but unless you were selling millions of sparrows every day, I don't know how you're going to make a living selling 2 of them for a farthing. You know, it wouldn't even be worth the cost of the ammunition to shoot a sparrow. It would cost you more for the bullets or the shotgun shell than the sparrow itself would be worth, or several of them. So Jesus is telling us about the value of a sparrow. We could say they were practically worthless. And then he goes on to say that God he knows the numbers of the hairs on your head, you know. Now, some of us might think that the value of hair might be more valuable than a sparrow. Oh, I just happened to look in that direction over there. He's a good sport. We laugh at that every time we come across. He doesn't tell us how much the hair was worth. But he does tell us about the sparrows. And he says, not a sparrow falls to the ground without God's knowledge. Just by virtue of the fact that God knows these seemingly unknowable things and is concerned about them, or these seemingly insignificant facts, it suggests a greater proposition here. That if God is aware of these things, then these things are important to him. Now, some people, there's a religious school of thought, and they're called deists. A deist is somebody that says God created everything, and he created it to function in a certain way, and then he just backed off and took his hands off, and he doesn't get involved at all. That it just goes on, and God's not involved in his creation. To me, that's like getting in a car and starting it up and putting it in drive, and then just, take your hands off the wheel for from then on. I don't think you would get very far before something terrible happened. And I don't think God ever took his hands off of creation. You read throughout the Bible where God intervenes. Him knowing how many sparrows, these worthless little birds on the market, him knowing how many of those at any time are alive and flying around this planet. There must be millions. There must be billions of them flying around, and he knows. It suggests that there is a bigger plan at work. If I've been told that if all the birds, there were no birds all of a sudden, that we would be knee-deep in insects after a short period of time. So that there is a balance in nature. So if God knows about all these sparrows, then he's concerned with how many there are. That means he is making sure that this balance is maintained, so that all will go as it should. It shows that if God is keeping track, he has the ability to do something about it as well. It suggests that God is in control. What about when things seem out of control? Oh, I don't know, like watching the news. Sometimes it just seems like everything's out of control. I'm reminded of, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, that episode when Lucille Ball was working at the chocolate factory. Anybody know about that? While I was making this outline, all of a sudden that popped into my head. And I told Ruth about it, and she just laughed. Just mentioning it, she laughed, like some of you. And it's just the funniest thing. I wasn't, even as a kid, I wasn't a great Lucille Ball fan, but there's just something about that episode. And so they're ordered to put the chocolate candies, the bonbons or whatever, into wax paper, or they're wrapping, and put it back on the belt, and so it goes into the next room where there other people will put it into the boxes. And so they start coming out, and Ethel, right? That's her name, Ethel, Vivian Vance, was standing right next to her, and they're working together at the same time. All of a sudden they start coming. At first they're kind of keeping control, aren't they? They put them in the thing, and it seems like now they're coming out more, and they're coming out maybe a little faster. And she's grabs some, and she puts some on the stainless steel in front of her, and then she's reaching over here and grabbing them, and then she doesn't have time to wrap it, and then she puts it in her mouth, and then she pulls her hat off, and she puts some in her hat, and then she's stuffing them down the front of her dress, and they managed to get all of the bonbons, and of course Ethel's doing the same thing, and it's just the funniest scene. See, it was out of control, you see, and sometimes life seems that way. Sometimes life seems like it's coming at you too fast with all of these different events, and something that you felt in control of, all of a sudden you're not in control. When Ruth had to go to the hospital, and she's getting ready for surgery, and I made mention back there, I said, well, it's out of my hands now. And Gary said it never was. And I said, you're right. Her life has never been in my hands. It's always been in God's hands. I think we could safely say that in Lucy's case, things were out of control. Lucy was trying to control the uncontrollable. Now, I had a similar experience. I worked in a bakery. This doesn't maybe enhance the message any. I just thought I'd make you laugh. I was working in the summertime at a bakery that made hot dog and hamburger rolls. And then they put me on the bread. I've been working 6 hours in this commercial 16 hours in this commercial bakery. I was tired. And, then the bread machine puts 4 loaves of bread or 3 in the pan and goes on and pulls another one up and puts 3, goes on, puts another, puts 3. It's a machine. But what happens is those machines get stuck up sometimes when the dough is it's too liquidy, it's too sticky, and it'll stick the machine up, and they have to shut the machine down to pull all that dough out and get it running right again. Well, my job is to pull pans off the conveyor belt because the pans keep coming. And so if they stop the machine, I've got to pull the pans off the belt until the machine gets running again, and then I put the pans back on. Well, I had fallen asleep. I had sat down on one of the trucks that they had in there, the things, and I had just gone off to sleep. And they were throwing dough at me and yelling at me.